Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast supplement. This is episode number 100. I just looked at it and I can't remember already. Number 189. Losing my mind. My name is Colin Moriarty. Here solo today. Hope you guys are all doing very well. You know, it's weird because we're in this kind of situation with Plus where we have some interviews coming up, but there are no spoiler casts to really do. And I don't know. I feel like we're kind of in this space where I'm not entirely sure what we should be focusing in on. Like, there's not quite enough legal stuff to get Hogue on. There's not quite enough tech stuff to get Tom on. We have the Sacred Symbols 200 lists going out, but I don't want to have those all on top of each other. We kind of await for more games for spoiler casts. So I thought we would get back into the mailbag and do a little something easy today, something casual. And I wanted to do it a little bit different. Maybe the title of this will have already indicated it. I don't know. But I went on our Discord, where, how many of you are here right now? Let's see. We have 4.78 thousand people, so 4,780 people. And joining us over there, that's all people that support us at the $5 level or higher on Patreon. So not everyone involved that's at that level is there, but everyone that's at that or there is at that level, if that makes any sense. So usually I put up a thread on Patreon, but I wanted to see what would happen if I put up a thread on Discord, and we got some responses, which is cool. I just did it overnight, and I haven't read any of them, so I don't know what they're going to say. We'll take them as they come, and I think they'll make sense within the confines of Sacred Symbols Plus, with the exception of this first one as I'm reading it. But it will be a good one to, I don't know, stretch our legs and all this. But just want to take a moment to thank you all again for your love, kindness, and support. We couldn't do it without you. I really enjoy doing Sacred Symbols Plus, and I'm glad so many of you find use in it as well. So let's start with Philip Mucinex, who wrote in and said, when are you going to add a cat to your family? Or have you relented to the clear superiority of dogs? Well, it's funny, man, because for, I don't know, 30 years, I was a cat supremacist. You know, I was just like, cats are obviously better than dogs. I like how they make you earn their affection. They're kind of dispassionate. They kind of take care of themselves. I mean, not that you really should be doing this, but my mom and me and my mom, when I was younger and I lived with her, we would leave our cats alone for a week or more at a time. You know, you'd feed them, give them a bunch of food and water. They'd be mad at you when you get back, of course. Have to change the litter box and all those things. But being introduced to dogs over time, it's funny because I've lived with dogs. I've been around dogs. My friends had dogs when I was a kid on Long Island. Roommate of mine in college had a dog. I lived obviously with Portillo for years in San Francisco. But for some reason, it wasn't until I met Lola, my ex-girlfriend's dog, that I really fell in love with dogs. And I think specifically the breed of Boston Terrier. And those are the two dogs I have now, Russian Treble, my pups. They're both Bostons. So I grew up with cats, but I've kind of segued to dogs. But with Micah, she wants to get a cat as well. And I have no problem getting a cat. I think it would be fun to have a cat in the mix. We have plenty of room in the house. We live in, I don't know, it's like 2,500 square feet, nothing too crazy, but plenty of room for a cat to roam. And I would really love to do that. So yeah, I'm open to that. But I have, as you said, relented to the clear superiority of dogs. There's no doubt about that. Thank you, Philip Mucinex. Nice name for writing in. Sean Mason wrote in and said, greetings, Colin. How important is it for PlayStation to get God of War out this fall? With Starfield delayed until next year, Xbox's 22 lineup looks bleak. This could be the PlayStation's time to retake that big fall release they have been lacking over the last few years. Yeah, it's interesting because we really have to keep in mind that Sony has rarely had Q4 games to begin with, right? Or late Q3, early Q4 games. They've been content releasing games at what would have at the time been strange times. Like releasing The Last of Us in June seems pretty smart now, and it was smart because there was nothing else to play, but that's a pretty daring time to put a game. 10 years before that, let's say in 2003 in the industry, you weren't releasing anything in the summer. I mean, I'm sure you guys remember, old school gamers remember, we have so much to play now, but there would be like weeks and even months where there would be like one or two games coming to a console. Remember that specifically with GameCube at times. So I feel like Sony doesn't have to do anything, particularly because I don't know that they've ever really attempted to do something in a repeatable, solidified way in the fall. That said, and we discussed this on regular Sacred as well, although you wouldn't have known this because it didn't go out by the time you wrote in. I do think that Sony has some sort of opening here to get God of War out. I just don't think they're confident that it's going to be. First of all, I'm not confident that it's going to be ready. And I think, if anything, I would take the different tact, which is Sony should look at Microsoft's pretty, as you put it, bleak position with their first party games in 2022 and say, like, well, we're already winning and selling more consoles than our competitor. We're doing it without, like, with one arm, arm tied behind our back because a bunch of our games aren't ready yet. And if their big game, like Starfield, other than Halo, is going to be probably the biggest thing they're ever going to do in the next few years, if that's not ready, then why do we need to be ready? We might as well just, we could strike while the iron's hot with God of War. That might be preferable. But I would be of the mind that if the game can be better and polished better and just held, then you really lose nothing to doing that if you're looking at things through the lens of how it syncs with what Xbox is doing. Because as I noted on Sacred itself, what Microsoft's gonna have to do now is go and buy third-party games for Game Pass, and this just further solidifies the downward spiral of having all of your content on a subscription service, and why I think it's maybe inevitable, but in my opinion, a mistake. And I mean, look at what's happening with Netflix and just the hemorrhaging of money over there with original content too. You, in some way, you can't have enough. So I don't know. I don't know that Sony will have a big fall release period. But I have this gut feeling that there's going to be a game we don't know about yet, or that at least hasn't been officially announced. Maybe that game is Last of Us Remake. Maybe that game is Factions or something else. But the longer the silence goes, and I've said this so many times over the years, but the longer the silence goes from a publisher that you're interested in, or a body, an entity that you're interested in, the more exciting it gets when they talk. So quiet Sony, it's frustrating from a content standpoint, like I said at the top of the show, but I don't think we can complain too much about the backlogs that we all have to deal with now, and the access to games being cheap, etc. I don't know. It's a good question though, Sean. Thank you for writing in. Lee is Cool Jenkins wrote in and said, "Hey Colin, when do you think devs will finally write off last gen and start concentrating on PS5? Gotham Knights canceling the PS4 version was a step in the right direction. This has to be the longest gen overlap ever, right? Many thanks and keep up the great work." It is, if you don't count, like, if you remove sports games and shovelware games and casual games, then I would say that still the biggest overlap would be maybe NES and the SNES. But the thing about that era is, even though there were cross-gen games, there were a lot of games that were just still for one or the other. For instance, SNES came out in 1991. In the West, in 1994. So 3 years later, Mega Man 6 came to NES, published by Nintendo, of all companies. So it wasn't like it was on both generations. So people were still supporting one or the other, sometimes both. But this peculiar cross-gen situation, I think, is protracted. And the Gotham Knights cancellation on PS4 is a really nice step in the right direction. Although I don't think it's being taken for the reasons that maybe some people are hoping. I think they're clearly just doing it because they realize that it's not working, and it's going to be a problem for them, right, to have it on these old consoles. I'd also maybe think that they look at the old console numbers and say, well, the numbers aren't really spreading. PS4 only sold 1 million units in fiscal 2021. So they could be looking at it and saying, well, there might not be demand, except for pent-up demand maybe from those who have the console and are still playing on that, but maybe most of our audience now is on these next-gen consoles on PC. I don't really know what their mentality is, but as I did note on the regular episode, I would love to see Gotham Knights running on PS4, and I'm curious if anyone in media saw it running on PS4, because maybe they would be able to give us some insight into it. But if anything, I think this is an acknowledgement from WB that they can't have a Cyberpunk-like situation on their hands. And you want to do everything you can to mitigate that. So I like it. I don't know what it means further than that. I would love to see God of War canceled on PS4. But I just don't think that's going to happen. And I assume 2023 is when that's going to start tapering off. But that's a long period of time. And what I'm curious about now is there's a recession coming. I don't think anyone can deny that. Inflation is so out of control that you're going to need to wring it out of the system with higher interest rates. That's going to cause lower spending and recession. And that's going to be necessary to kind of fix the toxicity in the financial system right now. But I bring that up because I wonder if this generation has already been affected by COVID and by I guess, the related issues of manufacture and shipping. But the PlayStation 3 era was also extended by financial circumstances. There's no doubt, and I think people at both companies would readily admit that they wanted to launch their PS4 and Xbox One earlier than 2013, but they just couldn't because of the knock-on effect of the recession and the financial crisis. So there's a lot kind of dwelling in the ether with PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and whatever Nintendo does next with Switch and its predecessor, or its successor, I should say. But I think amongst those issues and intangibles have to be considered the economic realities that are just going to compound issues that already exist from issues that exist from COVID. So if you have a manufacturer problem or you have a shipping problem, you're going to have a bigger manufacturing problem, shipping problem. And I think that that's what they're kind of acknowledging. And I'd love to know what Sony and like companies, Microsoft, Nintendo, others, like, how do they secure silicon? Like, what does it look like? How do they call in favors and bid? And there's a lot I'd like to know more about in this regard, but we're getting off the topic. Thank you for writing in. Dan Excel wrote in and said, "Hey, Colin, do you ever plan on playing the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection? I only ask since you've never played Lost Legacy and you mentioned rushing through Uncharted 4. Also, what platinum are you working on now? Have a great weekend." Thank you, Dan. So I don't know that I'll play Legacy of Thieves collection anytime soon. Because I played Uncharted 4 on PS4, I'd like to go back to that version and clean up the trophies and get the platinum there. And then with Lost Legacy, I'll probably just play it on PS4. And see, the reason that I want to do this is because, although I'm doing it kind of in reverse with some trophy stuff, is I don't want to, like, Legacy of Thieves collection will be awesome, like untouched and unmolested for future use when I want to go for the trophies or replay these games again, do it for knockback in the future, whatever. Then I'll have this newer, nicer version to go to. I'm trying to do the same thing with, like when Spider-Man Special Edition or whatever it was came out with Miles Morales. I have that on PS5, but I hate the whole trophy cross, like, auto pop thing. And so that's like, I'm saving that for when we get to that on knockback one day and so on and so forth. So I'm kind of just like trying to go back and clean verticals that I've already started and leave the others untouched for future use, because there's no doubt that I'll play Uncharted again one day, you know? I like to do that. And so I think it'll be cool to get into the Legacy of Thieves collection, but probably in the far-flung future. And as far as what platinum I'm working on now, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands is the one that I'm working on right now. I feel like the game's good, but I just wish they'd shut the fuck up. There's just too much dialogue. I just want to play. I just feel like for a Borderlands game, in quotes, I know it's trying to do something different. I appreciate it. I respect it. I think it's cute. It's charming. It's quirky. All those good things. But shut the fuck up. All right. Negative Xerox wrote in and said, "Hey, Colin, wanted to change it up from normal gaming question and talk hockey. With Trotz being out, who do you see as the possible next coach for the Islanders?" I don't want to get too deep into non-sacred symbols or PlayStation stuff, but I will say that as far as Barry Trotz getting fired, I found that shocking. I don't know what that's all about. And what was even weirder about that was, like, Doug Waite having some weird shit to say about it too. Like, I think we're going to go, Islanders always make these stupid moves. Like it was inevitable. We had like this few years of promise and conference finals and all of that. It just feels like it's going back downhill. And like the Jets, I'm wearing my Jets shirt now. It's just any good stuff. It just seems brief. And the Islanders were in this interesting renaissance as they moved back to Long Island from Brooklyn and all of that. And it's sad to see it. Anyway, thank you for writing in. Assassinated Devil wrote in and said, "Hey, Colin, do you think Sony will go back to the Infamous franchise this generation? I was a massive fan of the first two games, just like you, and given how superheroes are more popular than ever right now, I feel that Infamous is a franchise that is full of storytelling and gameplay potential. Thanks for churning out quality content week after week." Thank you for writing in. I think what they need to do first is make Infamous 1 and 2 available on PS4/PS5. I think that's kind of where you need to begin. And part of me feels like they were quite ahead of the curve with Infamous and this notion of superheroes and this choice-based, agency-based play, open worlds, collectathons. Like, it was a good mix. Infamous and especially Infamous 2 are just fantastic games. I love those games. However, I wonder if, since times have changed, I mean, Infamous 1 came out 2009, Infamous 2, 2011, Infamous 3, 2014, or Infamous Second Son on PS4. I feel like maybe times have changed a little bit. And since now they have Spider-Man and Wolverine, do you also want to have a superhero saga that, at least in terms of series, pales in comparison to what you're already doing. I personally feel like Sucker Punch's talents are better used elsewhere. Certainly on a Ghost of Tsushima sequel, but maybe even beyond that. And if they wanted to open it up to others, I think that would be cool. I do know, and we reported on one of the episodes of Sacred Symbols Plus, I don't know where it was, that I think Ben was messing around with like an Infamous game on Vita and all of that. It's definitely something that would be fun to go back to, but I don't know that it really fits or makes sense anymore in this like post Hyper Insomniac Spider-Man Wolverine world. I feel like it's different now. Plus, you have third parties putting out games like The Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy and Midnight Suns and all this. So I just feel like, well, do you really need to use, again, every opportunity taken is infinite opportunities lost. So do you really want to take that opportunity when you could take the opportunity to do something that differentiates yourself more? Maybe I would say the idea would be get the Infamous games on PS4, the 2 that aren't on PS4, and then farm it out to someone else if you want, but definitely not Sucker Punch. Oh, Jim Ryan writes in and says, much like the PS3 360 generation being dragged out due to the global recession. We already talked about this. Thank you for writing in. Astro Parrot King wrote in and said, hi, boss. Are you going to get a Publix chicken tender sub? I'd like to. I've heard great things about it, but we don't go there for that. Like we go to Publix to shop, like, get our cold cuts and our groceries and all this, meats. But I've heard great things about it. But I'm totally content with the Wawa one. Number 2, for your G.I. Joe shelf in the background, are you going to expand it? Well, it's already all the way along the walls. You just can't see it. It goes all the way to the window over here, which of course you can't see as well. And actually back here next week, this might be the last time you see this actually, like this, I'm having a shelf built into this wall, and that will be not glassed, but lit. And that will be like vehicles and other items, like some of the shit that's on the shelf back here. So the problem with the G.I. Joe shelf, and I'll show you, I'll get up and show you. We have to fix this because I don't know if it's doing it now, but you can see that when the LED lights are on back here, that it creates like a small line across the screen. I don't know if it's doing it right now, but it'll slowly scroll down as it refreshes the image. So that's the reason I usually don't have that light on, but it doesn't seem like it's doing it right now. I wonder why that is. Maybe it's a little lighter in here. I don't know. But I got to get going on that, by the way. I'm going to actually dedicate this weekend, I think, to really going through my Joes and just figuring out, at the very least, like what I have, because I need to buy more, because I like G.I. Joes are just getting more and more expensive, and I want to make sure I'm starting to fill in the holes and all the rest. Oh, Surf the Void wrote in and said, hey, Tane Spanker, with my anticipation for factions growing by the day, I had the thought that maybe what Naughty Dog could do to change the pace is create a multiplayer-only game with the same care as the single-player games. That Last of Us 1 Factions is great, and Uncharted 3 multiplayer was amazing, but those are side projects on an already complete game. I think they could pull it off. Maybe Factions is taking so long because this is their idea, just a thought. I actually do wonder that as well, and I think we've talked about this in the past, that I wouldn't be surprised at this point if Factions is just a $70 game. And could they make The Last of Us compelling enough in multiplayer like they did with Factions in the original 2013 version to... could they make it interesting enough, how do I put this, to justify the opportunity cost of not using those man hours on what they're better known for? We have to ask ourselves, like, what does it mean to work at Naughty Dog? Like, what does it mean to be there? Is it just sheer talent or grittiness, or is it the desire to make a specific kind of game? And I ask that only because multiplayer is so competitive and the scene is so competitive that I really think to make Factions all it can be, you almost have to embrace the aspects of it that aren't Naughty Dog, because we already know the high quality is there, the polish is there, but there needs to be more than that to have a viable online game, especially if you're going to charge for it. So I like the idea of Factions being this full $70 game. I like the idea of it even being single player or multiplayer. Maybe it has like co-op stuff in it, like a campaign. I don't think any of this is unheard of. I don't know. I just don't know what it's going to be. I think what they've realized over time with factions is that it just continues to be bigger than they thought. There's no doubt, because I was so involved with the game pre-release, that they had no idea what they had on their hands with factions. They didn't give a fuck about it. And we didn't even play it until like the days before the game came out to get footage for, to review experience and to get footage for it and all of that for the video review. And I remember that very well. And it was when the game came out that they realized that actually this is pretty good. And I think that Sony was kind of just betrayed generally by a bad, as I understand it, bad mock reviewing, in which it indicated that The Last of Us was maybe an 8 and it's not Uncharted. And they were just, that mock reviews are subjective. So, but they were wrong. I mean, they were just wrong about the critical reception of the game. And so I feel like Naughty Dog's energies going into a multiplayer game sounds fun, but I don't know that they have the skills necessary without going outside to do what they need to do to really do that, because they have, as I said, the talent to make the games they make fundamentally, unless you're identifying the talent as just something different. But remember, when you take a talent that's there to make a game and you have them make something else, you get the Avengers, you get Anthem, you get Babylon's Fall. So we have to be careful about embracing. We have to be careful about this idea that we would embrace a $70 Naughty Dog game without reservation. We'll see what happens. Jot wrote in and said, "Dear Colin, after seeing the backlash of the game journalist set to Gene Park's interview on the show, I have to wonder, what is going on in this world? Why is a play conversation between two people worth melting down over? What is happening in the gaming press?" Well, Gene's coming back on the show, because Gene doesn't give a fuck about what those people have to say. He's awesome. And I think, and we'll talk about it on the show, but because that's going to be a major topic of the show. And he also has a lot of things he wants to talk to me about and ask me about too. And I'm really looking forward to that conversation. But I think a lot of it has to do with a lack of control. The games media, let me back up. Political orthodoxy, which I think we see most expressed on the left, but can be expressed on both sides. But I think right now in this moment, I think we all understand that we're living in a left-wing moment in the United States. People that take on a worldview as part of their personality and need to depend on defending that worldview to lift themselves up, lift up their friends and their associates. This is all done through the auspices of control or lack thereof. If you can't control the message, if you can't control the lockstep, or what I would call goose stepping of all of these people together, if you can't control who they'll talk to and what they'll say, then you have no control. And without that control, people start asking questions. And it was fun for the first time in my life, because I don't use Twitter anymore, apart from, I read it sometimes. I don't really read my mentions, and I just, I DM people and stuff, but this was the first time that I was under attack where I just didn't participate at all. And what I think ended up happening as a result of that is people just realized, like, this is insane. First of all, they didn't change Gene's mind. They probably pushed Gene further away from them, which is a shame, because unlike most of them, Gene is an actual journalist. And I'm not just saying that because he's our friend or he likes us. I'm saying that because he is. Go listen to his story and where he comes from. He doesn't come from this world. And that's what makes him so intriguing. And he writes for what I would argue is the second or third most respected and biggest newspaper in the United States, the Wall Street Journal, or I'm sorry, the Washington Post, only behind the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. So, and I think actually Wall Street Journal and Washington Post kind of mix up at number 2 in terms of subscriber base. So what is going on in their world? I think what's going on in their world. I think that these people are miserable. I think that these people live like in 7 people in a fucking shoebox apartment in miserable shit-covered cities where they have to pretend that they like everyone, where they have to lick the boots of corporations to get access, where Chinese corporations try to assign a bunch of their paychecks. These people can go fuck themselves. What's going on in their world? They're failing. I'm happy to talk to any of them. In fact, I had this idea. I expressed to Micah. I haven't expressed it publicly, but I'll tell you guys, is that I'm almost willing to say, like, to the journalist who hates me or the media person who hates me, I'll give, like, choose your champion, right? I'll give you $1,000 to, you can do whatever you want with it, but you can presumably donate it to a cause, whatever you want. Your job is to present the case against me to me. And you can say whatever you want. And I'll give you as long as you want. Maybe we'll have random people on to assess it. They'll never do it. They know that under the slightest scrutiny, I would break them. Put some of these screeching morons in front of me and we know what will happen. Haza wrote in and said, do you think Jim Ryan's abortion email is a Republicans buy sneakers 2 moment for the games industry? Do you think Florida's war on Disney had anything to do with it, despite PlayStation's operations being centered around liberal California? And do you think there is any hope that the legacy games media follows suit and reins in their naked and exclusionary partisan activism? For the last part, no, but it's because it's too far down the road for them now. I don't think that they can really change without new leadership, new personnel, all the rest. Jim Ryan's comment isn't offensive. And I would argue that the reason that Jason didn't put the full email into the article is because he realizes that if he did and people read the entire thing in context, it probably wasn't that bad. We all know that, right? Did it seem a little ham-fisted, tin-eared? Probably. Is saying like people have different opinions on issues like abortion at our company, our partners, different countries we work in, certainly our consumers. What he's saying isn't controversial, and it is an echo of what happened with Disney, because Disney was stupid enough to think that the insane people that for some reason they let run parts of their company speak for their consumers or the people at large. Ron DeSantis shoving his boot up Disney's ass was awesome. This company has gotten away with fucking murder, basically, at both the state and federal level for many decades. I mean, look what's happening now with going after their trademarks. The only reason Mickey Mouse isn't in public domain is because of special carve-outs and special lobbying efforts that Disney undertook, specifically in the 80s and 90s. Ironic, by the way, for a company that uses other people's licenses to make their cartoons. From The Little Mermaid to Pocahontas to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Robin Hood, Peter Pan, but they get to keep their shit on the side. The partisan activism is tiring. I personally am pro-choice to an extent. I would say first trimester at the very most. But I understand that women need a way out. Things happen, accidents happen, situations occur every day. But this idea that abortion is this thing like, scream your abortions, girls. It's like, that's ghoulish and fucked. And we need to speak about this issue as more than just something that's political, but that's something that's real and social. It hurts people. Some people it helps, but some people it hurts. It's real. This idea that everyone that makes games, plays games, works in the games industry, et cetera, need to all feel the same exact way about this issue is ridiculous. I was born, raised Catholic, and I think you can understand that this issue in my family is a certain way. It's a certain way with a lot of people. I respect people on both sides of the argument. I think I take a much more gray and utilitarian approach to it, just saying like, well, people are gonna have abortions, right? Like, so what are we gonna do about it? Like, are we gonna make it safe? Are we gonna make it accessible? Are we gonna educate people? Are we gonna make contraceptives legal? Oh, we should do all those things. Are contraceptives available? We should do all those things. But I for one feel like I'm tired of being bullied in some way for political points of view that I don't hold, or political points of view that I do hold, that people feel like, well, how can you feel that way about something? They're just totally normal things. And I think Jim Ryan in some way was speaking to that. Not only is Sony a Japanese company, and you can go read about abortion, which is de jure illegal in Japan, but it's in fact the United States that has some of the most liberal abortion policies in the entire world. And Roe versus Wade simply kicks it back to the states, saying, see, I don't want to get too political, but what bothers me about this is that are people not smart enough to separate two issues? Like, the court's job is to say, like, does this vibe with the Constitution? Yes or no? That's it. That's the only. And then you can go to Congress and codify it. But the reason that these things aren't codified is because no, it's not as popular as you think. No, people don't want 6-month abortions. You know, like, so why can't we just agree to disagree, have it out in legislatures around the country, have it out in political venues across the country, and treat everyone with a little bit of respect, and not act like being pro-choice is the only choice. Because abortion, while necessary, is fucking dark. And let's treat it with some gravity. Let's treat it with some respect, not bandy it around to prove a political point. I must admit, the choice issue is like number 30 on my list of things that I care about. It is. Now, is it easy for me to say as a man? Sure. But I'm not willing to blow up friendships, blow up relationships, blow up my company, or the split the audience further. These people that work at these sites that do some of these podcasts and whatever, they just don't care. And the reason they don't care is because they don't have to pay a price. They would pay a price if they had to foster their own community instead of glomming onto things other better people built. And I'll leave it there. Oh, and by the way, I'm sorry, Huzzah, you said, is this the Republicans buy sneakers 2 moment for the games industry? Yes. I told someone in the industry that's at one of the big websites that I'm friendly with to not let people within trick them into thinking it was always like this, because it wasn't. The industry wasn't always like this. This bullying, fucking harsh, ridiculous. Why can't we just treat people with respect? And why can't we understand that it's not as easy as... Let me back up and say, let's ask ourselves why we would want 9 unelected judges to tell us what we should do with our bodies. Shouldn't we at least be closest to the choice through state legislatures? I don't know. But for me, I'm pro-choice. But I respect the pro-life argument. I have plenty of people that are pro-life in my life that I love. And all are welcome here. Kabuto Kishi wrote in and said, hey, Slitter Commander. I know you've talked about the dream of one day Lilimo getting the chance to develop a G.I. Joe game. I have to imagine you've conceived what the game will look like already, given your intense fandom of the series. Would it be like Contra-like, or maybe something like old school Metal Gear games? Hell, I'd be stoked for a G.I. Joe game with Metal Slug's aesthetic. I could even see a Strider-type game starring Snake Eyes or Storm Shadow. Anyway, I was just curious how much thought you had put into it. I'm so sick of Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. I really am. Personally, I'm just so sick of these characters. I see it as a side-scroller. So there were 2 G.I. Joe games on NES, actually made by different studios. The Taxon one was the one that I think was more influential. And what I would like is just, because we're an old school studio, pixel art, side-scroller, action games, selectable characters, maybe you have 4 or 6 G.I. Joes to select from, and non-linear stages like Mega Man where you go after some various bosses and maybe even get the power, not their power, but maybe like, for instance, my favorite G.I. Joe enemy is a guy named Metalhead. He's an explosives expert. He has like a missile launcher on his backpack. He has missile launchers on his arms and his legs. And in the comics and in the cartoon, he's like an idiot. And he says like bang, bang. And like, that's how he tells his things to launch. And it's always going awry. But what if one of the stages in the game, you went and fought him and then you got his backpack or his missile launchers and you can use them. So kind of like Mega Man-esque. The thing about this is I'm so keen to do a G.I. Joe game that I would absolutely fund it myself. I'm pretty serious about trying to pitch Hasbro on this. I don't exactly know how we would go about it. We'd have to carve out some money and some time. I don't want to build an entire game and then present it to them. I'd rather do the more Sanzaru Sly Cooper 4 thing where it's like, look what we did. We can do this. After playing that G.I. Joe game in 2020, which was horrible, I got the Platinum Trophy on it, which is actually one of the rarest Platinums I own. I know what G.I. Joe fans want. I know what they like. We're old. We don't want to play some shitty 3D game. We want a good 2D game. And that's what I would do. Another idea would be like a G.I. Joe brawler. Although if Lily Mode did a brawler, we would do something else. We actually have a the very first game that when I was there, then when I came on, the very first game we were workshopping was a brawler, and we actually have a demo of it, like a playable piece of it. But maybe one day it'll see the light of day. Billiam wrote in and said, Colin, Elden Ring has now sold 13.4 million copies in less than 3 months. While it may not be a 97 in some opinion circles, it is inarguably a fire giant size success. I consider Elden Ring an online single-player game. You can steal that term and take credit for it. The multiplayer aspects can be abstract, like when a player tells you there is a boss ahead or completely in your face. I don't know what that means. Like PvPing for hours in the Academy courtyard. FromSoft has already perfected the genre Haven, and others are attempting to create. I don't know what you're talking about. 2-part question. What do you think of this take? And how do you think the success of Elden Ring will affect the industry and FromSoft internally? Thanks, Colby. I will say that we kind of went into this on the last episode. I don't want to be too redundant, but Elden Ring is an enigma. I don't quite understand it. Like it's something that has to be deeply studied, I think. If we took ourselves more seriously as an industry, we would certainly do so. I think there are a lot of reasons why Elden Ring is successful. I think part of it is zeitgeist. I think part of it is the snowball effect from fans becoming bigger and bigger and demanding more and more attention. I think the multi-platform part of it is huge. A game like this wouldn't have been as big if it was just on one console, of course. So I don't know exactly what it is that set this game off, that allowed it in 5 weeks, 35 days, I think, as we put it on the show. They sold 400,000 copies a day on average for 35 days. Dude, Demon's Souls on PS3 sold 1 million copies after a year. Bloodborne, I think, was at 4 million or something like that in 2019, 2020. I was kidding around. Elden Ring's already sold more than every Metroid game. So it's the best-selling game of the last 12 months in the United States, even more than Call of Duty. Some pretty incredible statistic. And I feel like it's going to be much replicated. I feel like they themselves have to kind of replicate it with a sequel, inevitably. And as I noted on Sacred itself, my hope is simply that they at least remain focused enough to realize, hey guys, we got to make something new too. Don't get caught up in only this. I know if people want them to go back to Armored Core, maybe even King's Field, that's all fine, but what about something new? I mean, they've done something new, but even when they did something new like Sekiro, I still feel like it's not really that new. I would love to see them do something else. Maybe even Miyazaki is not involved, as he does, the sequel to this or whatever. Turbodong69 wrote in, said, hey Colin, don't be a coward. I've written in twice before about your dislike of Metal Gear Solid 4 and how it doesn't make any sense, and you've yet to have the stones to explain yourself. MGS4 takes all the Japanese silliness and delightful melodrama of Metal Gear to 11, while wrapping the story beautifully, modernizing the gameplay, and having incredible graphics for the time. What is your deal? If you don't respond this time, I'll assume you've revised your opinion and are too embarrassed to admit that you were wrong for the first time ever. I admit I'm wrong all the time. What are you talking about? Metal Gear Solid 4, I think, is one of those games, it's just bad timing for me. I didn't like it when I played it, but I never went back to play it either. Good news, if you don't listen to Knockback, is that a couple of months ago, people voted for Metal Gear Solid 4 to be played. We did MGS 2 and 3. We did MGS 1 a long time ago. So I'm going to be playing MGS 4 in the coming months for the show. And we will revisit this in great detail over several hour conversation with Dagan, who has never played it. And I will save I will reserve my comments for that time. I really liked MGS 3, but it's not as good as people were saying it was. And I'm wondering if that's true with MGS 4 or not. But time will tell. I am happy that when I go back and play it, there will be a trophy patch available, which is nice. I love that they did that. Josh McKinney wrote in and said, hey, Colin, hope you're having a great day. With Jason Schist's tweet and backlash that it's sparking on Jim Ryan's corporate email asking his company to God forbid, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we already talked about this, but I appreciate you writing in, Josh. Sorry, by the way, I really am reading these on the fly, so I don't know what you guys have said. There are 4 more for us to get through, though. Not Skywalker wrote in and said, hey, Colin, in the wake of news of Starfield and Redfall's delay, as well as the ongoing lull in information regarding Final Fantasy XVI and Ragnarok, I got to thinking and appreciating the amount of cool multiplat stuff seemingly slated for this year. from Atomic Heart, Hogwarts, Callisto Protocol, Evil West, Gotham Knights, and so on, there seems to be a lot to still look forward to this year. What multiplayer third-party title are you most anticipating at this time, and why? Is it something we've known about or something you're still hoping to be revealed, like Cloud Chambers game? Thank you, Aiden, for writing in. It's a good question. We actually went through a small list that I dug up on Sacred of games that are still coming out this year, and I think the one that sticks out to me the most is actually Saints Row. I just feel like I get a feeling that I want to play a game like that every so often, like what I would call a Grand Theft Auto or Grand Theft Auto Light type open world car shooting. Obviously Saints Row, takes it to, Volition takes it to another level with a lot of it, but Hogwarts Legacy is probably the one I'm most excited about, but I just don't believe it's coming out this year. And Callisto Protocol sounds cool because I like the idea of a single player game taking place in that PUBG universe. You brought up Atomic Heart. The interesting thing about Atomic Heart is that it's Russian, and we don't really know how that's going to work. I mean, let me see if anyone said anything about this for a while. Yeah, because Mundfish, which is the studio that's making it, is a Russian studio. And with the with the combat in Eastern Europe and kind of just the general anti-Russian shit that I feel like is percolating, as if all Russians are to blame for their tin pot dictators' decisions. I wonder if, and with PlayStation and other platform holders deciding to not do business in Russia right now, like, is that game even going to be able to come out? I'm really curious about that because they are acting as developer and publisher, and I don't know. I want to know, will there be blowback on them because they're Russian, and will they be able, like, so will people be like, I'm not playing this game, I'm not buying this game? Will there be unfair treatment of that game? A lot to consider with Atomic Heart that I don't think people are considering. Like, we're embargoing Russia, so how are we going to get their game on the PlayStation Network? It doesn't really make any sense. I'll be curious about that. But Gotham Knights, I think, looks cool. I think people are being kind of hard on it. I think it looks fun. And but I would say, as in the AAA space, Saints Row is what I'm looking forward to. In the smaller game space, I mean, River City is getting a new game this summer, which I'm excited about. I'm excited to play that Ayuden Chronicles game that just came out, which is like a bite-sized role-playing game. Of course, Super Perils of Bacon comes out June 3rd. If you guys want to check that out. What else? There are a few. Oh, of course, the Turtles Konami collection comes out, as well as the new Turtles game. So that could be fun too. So there are a lot of smaller games, but I'm also looking forward to using this time to maybe just not play games so much for a little while. Like, just kind of drain the system, start again. Like, there's nothing demanding my time right now, and that's kind of nice. I feel like I play almost too much sometimes, where it's like, you got to tend to your other hobbies. You got to be well-rounded and take care of your mind and all of that. Acid Drop wrote in and said, hey, Colin, you've mentioned before how you were and still are a big advocate for review scores going away. If this were to come true, how do you think it would change game development? We know that companies and developers seem to take critical reception and scores very seriously, especially Metacritic. So would developers change gears and perhaps take feedback from well-constructed videos from popular YouTubers? Anyway, hope you're doing well. It's funny because the body of people that I'm least worried about when it comes to getting review scores are the developers. Who gives a shit? It's about what is serving the audience and how they're best served. And I think getting rid of review scores would probably be beneficial because this doesn't happen so much anymore, but you guys might recall, especially in the PS3 era, like a lot of games, bigger games, had bonus structures tied not only to sales and cumulative sales, but actually Metacritic reception. And famously, Obsidian, like everyone at Obsidian, lost what would conceivably be millions of dollars in bonuses because from their publisher, which was Bethesda, because at the time, because they got an 84 on Metacritic or something with New Vegas, and 85 was the Metacritic score that they had to hit. So imagine just that arbitrary number that really is unquantifiable affecting your ability to get, each of the people at the studio getting like $50,000 or $100,000 for the success of their game. I mean, that sucks. And that, I think, would be an advantage to them. Be like, well, it's got to go deeper than this. We can't judge it on this. When I think about the people that are giving scores to review, like, to games, and big ass corporations are like, we're going to tie your money to them, I'd be like, I don't fucking think so. So I'm not so worried about the developer being negatively affected. I think that they'll be positively affected. I'm more excited about the ability to get more thoughtful input into the game space. And scores are reductive. They're stupid. I'm sure if you looked at the telemetry on IGN, what people do when they go scroll a review is they click on it, scroll all the way down, look at the score, maybe read like the blurb, and then they X out. Now, some people might say, well, that means that the review shouldn't exist and that the market doesn't demand it. And I'm like, well, no, you're not trying to do it a purer way. So you don't really know that, do you? At the bottom of all of this, by the way, is just access to Metacritic itself. Like, IGN removing itself from Metacritic is bad for IGN. That's what they care about. Whiskey Sin wrote in, said, hello, Colin. Being someone who didn't necessarily want to be a leader and now has people around you that are affected by your decisions, have you formed any outlets with other small business owners who understand the burden you deal with in that role? This is not to disregard the benefits such as the freedom it affords, but the responsibility you feel in taking care of the people you employ and contract with isn't really something you get to take a vacation from. I have found it difficult to find the non-corporate types like myself, but they're out there, and I think it's important. No, thank you, Dave, for writing in. No, I don't share that burden really with anyone else. I probably should. I don't know why I don't. But yeah, I don't really talk to anyone about it. It is a lot of weight. It's an incredible amount of weight to have people depend on you. Like, if I go down, if I make a mistake, if the content's not good, then we all lose. And so the going's good, but I'm trying to prepare for cloudier days, and I'm trying to keep momentum going, earning it, and also understanding that nothing lasts forever. So you can't tie your self-worth to these vacillating numbers. But in the moment that things are going good and we try to prolong that moment indefinitely, yeah, everyone will be well taken care of. And as far as the burden, it's really on me. I didn't expect to be in this position. You're right. I don't know that I'm a natural leader. I think I'm a good leader. I think I'm a totally good leader. I think that we're here we are, but I don't think it came naturally to me, and it's still not natural to me. Finally, Rainick wrote in and said, hi, Colin. Given the great first quarter numbers Sony have put on MPD, I just saw that this morning, and their earnings call plans to buy back $200 billion in yen of shares, thanks in large part to PlayStation. That's $1.5 billion. I must ask, are you still using Uber as your primary means of transportation? If so, how has the increase in gas prices affected the Uber costs, and has it had any impact on driver availability? I don't use Uber anymore. I would if I had to, but I haven't been in an Uber probably in 2+ years. Micah drives. I don't really go anywhere. We live in a neighborhood. We just walk around and walk the dogs. We have to go to a store or something. Micah usually just goes and does that, and we get delivery and things delivered. So yeah, I don't drive, and I don't need a car, and it's not been a problem really at all. All right, interesting way to end it, but that is where we will end it. Thank you guys for this little experiment writing in on Discord. I don't know if we'll do it again anytime soon, but I wanted to just see like what kind of input we got and if we heard from different kinds of people, and I think we did. So hopefully it was successful. But I hope you all, if you're listening to this when it goes live, have a good rest of your weekend. If not, be well when you do listen to it. And thank you again for your kindness and support. Keep in touch. Let us know how we're doing, and we'll talk to you later. Okay, goodbye. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.